as I said in the prayer, the crisis seems to deepen day by day. And if you want to know what gives me hope, aside from, of course, my faith in God and his having given us this country and being willing to show this nation mercy, if there are those of us who are trying to uphold our Constitution and the values of our nation, but I also derive a great deal of hope from men like my good friend General Jerry Boykin, because he's a man who served his country 36 years, wounded twice in combat, responsible for really the rise of our whole special forces mission in our military, and is now serving as executive vice president of the Family Research Council. So having served our country in uniform, he continues to serve our country on the front lines of a war. Thank God this one is not a war of violence, but it is nevertheless a very profound war that we are having for the soul of our nation. I can't think of anybody better to be in the forefront of leading that war than somebody who knows what it is to bleed for the freedom that we all enjoy. And so without any further delay, my good friend, General Jerry Boykin, Executive Vice President for the Family Research Council. General, please take 7-10 minutes longer if you think you need it, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you, Bishop. It's a pleasure. Let me talk about, I think, what most of the nation is talking about right now, and that is the situation in the Middle East and ISIS. Let me be clear that I don't use the term ISIL because there's a subliminal message there. And ISIL is recognizing the Levant, which is an area without Israel. In other words, it fails to recognize the sovereignty of Israel, in my view, when you use the Levant. And the Levant, the term Levant, if you go back and look at the history of it, really became prominent as a result of the Sykes-Picot agreement back in about 1916, before there was an Israel, and they were dividing up the Middle East there between the British and the French. So I don't use ISIL simply because, in my mind, it doesn't recognize Israel. Now, that said, it's important to realize that, first and foremost, ISIS is Al-Qaeda. We've been watching ISIS for a long time. It started in '99, and after 2003, ISIS took the name Al-Qaeda in Iraq, led by a guy named Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. He was killed in 2006 in a drone strike. And they had a couple more leaders after that, and they were all killed. And then the guy that currently is in charge of this ISIS organization, a guy named Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, became the leader, and he is a spiritual cleric. That's important. He's a cleric. He's a renowned cleric, as a matter of fact. So what this guy is doing is he is following the dictates of the Quran. He is he left clerical duties and became the leader of ISIS, but he is following the dictates of the Quran, and he is a scholar, and he knows the dictates of the Quran. So all this nonsense about being surprised by these people, we weren't surprised by them. The intelligence community was not surprised. The reality is the president wasn't paying attention because, he didn't want Al-Qaeda to be strong, because he had told the world that they were not. They were on the ropes with the killing of bin Laden. And then B, because it's just not part of his agenda. His advisors are authorities in Marxism, global warming, and the LGBT agenda, and he was not paying attention. And nobody around him was trying to force him to do so. Now, that said, what do? We've got a situation here that is very dangerous. We're either going to have to defeat ISIS in that battle space there, or we're going to have to build Fortress America and be prepared to defeat them here on our own shores. And make no mistake, they are in America right now. They've come across the southern border. And it's Al-Qaeda has come across our southern border, and even the director of the FBI about 6 years ago admitted in congressional testimony that they had come across and set up terrorist cells here in the United States. So we have a very serious problem here. Now, what do we do? Well, here's my view of what we do. We continue to build the coalition, make it as big as strong as possible. Secondly, we arm the Kurds. The Kurds are our friends. The Kurds have always been our friends. Kurds are tough, robust people. Their Peshmerga, or their military capabilities, are tough fighters, but they're ill-equipped. And if we can arm them and arm them directly, we'll never have to worry about the Kurds turning on us. They won't do that. They have been with us for decades. But we need to arm them directly. Don't arm them through the Iraqi government. Arm them directly. Okay, well, what's the third thing we need to do? Third thing we need to do is we need to put whatever number of special forces that the U.S. Special Operations Command recommends, we need to put them on the ground there in the numbers that are required to really make a difference here. And they will be they'll be operating with the Kurds. They'll be operating with some of the Sunni elements in some of the villages there in Iraq right now. And they will be using laser target designators to designate targets to take out as much of the ISIL infrastructure and military capabilities as possible using American air power, both manned aircraft and drones. And then finally, don't let the border of Syria be an impediment to taking out targets. We should take them out wherever we find them, and that includes Syria. Now, two things that we shouldn't do. One, we should not arm and train the Free Syrian Army. I know that is something that is debated by both the right and the left. Conservatives and liberals are on both sides of this issue, but here's my reason for being strongly opposed to equipping and training this Free Syrian Army. A, we can't vet them. We don't know who they are. B, there's only 5,000 of them. Does anybody really think that they're going to take on 30 to 40,000 members of ISIS? C, their real objective is not to destroy ISIS, it's to take over the government of Syria and destroy Bashar al-Assad. And then finally, our track record of arming these Muslim groups is not good. We armed them in Libya. What happened? They came back and attacked us. We've armed them in Syria, and they have now been killing Christians, and they've been threatening Israel. Bashar al-Assad has never killed Christians, and he's never threatened Israel. So we're arming people that ultimately we're probably going to wind up having to fight against them as well, and they are probably going to do just what they've been doing ever since this whole uprising started. They're going to kill Christians in Syria, and I think that's a bad thing. So that's my thoughts, that's my recommendations, and so I'll turn it back to see what your questions are.
All right, I appreciate that, General. Folks, if you have questions about that, and I want to ask you a couple questions about what happened this past weekend at the Value Voters Summit, about that, folks, press *6 to get in queue, *6. Martin, of course, I'm away. I'm not at my laptop, so I can't see anything.
Sure.
So you'll have to keep me informed.
Sure, we've got a couple in queue, sir, and
okay, all right.
more joining.
Okay. General, let me ask you the first question. Just recently, just in the last couple of days, the president said that his intelligence agencies underestimated ISIS effectiveness, overestimated the ability of the Iraqi army to resist any sort of terrorist onslaught. He didn't take responsibility himself. In fact, he named Clapper as the person responsible for that. What are the implications of that when the intelligence arm of the United States feels that the president is essentially saying they're not doing their job and that's why we've been caught blindsided?
Yeah, well, you saw that immediately there was a leak out of the intel community saying, hey, he's had options on the table for over a year as to how to deal with this. They've been offered by the Central Command. You remember there was a leak that came out right away. This is, first of all, Clapper, I worked for Clapper. Clapper is the same guy that said in congressional testimony that the Muslim Brotherhood is a largely secular organization. Then he said they eschew violence. I know Clapper. He knows better than that. He's smarter than that. He's pandering to the Obama administration there. So I'm not very sympathetic to the fact that he was thrown under the bus. That said, I think the idea of throwing the intel community under the bus has become very fashionable in this administration to include members of Congress like Nancy Pelosi. And I will tell you that they know who ISIS is. They've been watching ISIS, and they've been putting it in the daily briefing for the president, who has been totally uninterested.
Okay, Martin, let's go to the calls, because I could go on with this. I think we got a major problem here, but go right ahead.
Very good. We're going to go to caller phone number ending in 2844. Caller 2844, go ahead.
Hey, Jerry, thanks. It's good to hear your voice. This is Bill Cook, IEW.
Hey, Bill.
I got a few quick questions. I'm just going to throw them out and let you answer them. I think they're all related. If you could speak a bit to the character of Barack Obama. Lately, he seems to be parroting the narrative of the stealth jihadists here in the United States. That's one. Number two, is the beheading we saw in Oklahoma City last week does it augur an increase in beheadings in the United States by these dogs? And also, is there really any substantive difference between ISIS, Hamas, CARE, all the organizations that are Brotherhood affiliated?
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that for me to answer?
Yes, sir. And it was quite a few
really,
questions thrown in together there, but
I know. What's really frightening is the thought that Barack Obama actually believes of what he's saying, that ISIS is not Islam, and it's really frightening that the president would actually believe that. The reality is he doesn't, though. He knows the score. He knows and I cannot give you a rational understanding of why he has been so supportive of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic groups in America. I do not understand it. I don't know why he chose Cairo as the first place to go on his apology tour, and why he has not been willing to stand up and say this is a ideological, theological struggle that we're in. I can't explain it, Bill, so I wish I could. Now, all of these groups are the same. The Muslim Brotherhood created Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda became the terrorist arm of the Muslim Brotherhood. They also created Hamas. So when you look at Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda, you're looking at all part of the same organization. The outlier is Hezbollah. Hezbollah was created by Iran, but Hezbollah will work with, Sunni groups as well. Even though they're Shia, they'll work with Sunni groups. Right now they're not, because they're actually fighting on behalf of and in support of Bashar al-Assad against Sunni groups. But they all are motivated by essentially the same theology. They're hardcore jihadists. Holy war.
Okay, we've got a number of callers here, and so we're going to pick up with caller number 7419. Caller 7419, go right ahead.
Thank you, General. This is Suzanne Curran in Shenandoah Valley. I've had the privilege to meet you, sir. I am currently reading the book by Kamal Salim, and am just getting to the part where he is arriving in the United States. I'm petrified, sir. What or who or where can some of us go to get speakers so we can bring some preparedness to our minds, so even though we may be scared to death of what could happen, like just happened in Oklahoma. We have some sense of comfort that we know what we should do as just ordinary citizens out here in the country.
Yeah. Well, by the way, that's a great book, Blood of the Lambs. And Kamal and I just turned in the manuscript of a novel that we have written together that we turned it in the end of August. And what we're really trying to do is highlight a lot of this stuff in novel form so people will, be more interested in reading it. But so that's our objective, is to really highlight the realities of the dangers of Islam. Now, where do you go to get speakers? Obviously, one of the great places to start is Center for Security Policy. Go to Frank Gaffney's office, and Bishop Jackson and his folks can get you in contact with them. And they've got people like John Guandolo and Claire Lopez and Diana West and all of those people will really tell the story very, very well. And then, of course, Act for America, Brigitte Gabriel. She's just an extraordinary woman. We had her there at the Values Voters Summit. She's just powerful speaker. And I mean, there's different organizations like that. You can get what am I thinking of? I was just on a program with him the other night. I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyhow, he's been working this for a long time. So there are plenty of speakers out there that you can get that will come and give you a detailed analysis of what's going on here.
Absolutely, Suzanne. If you start with Frank Gaffney, he'll open up a wealth of other people. I was with him at a conference, as a matter of fact, yesterday. The days run together, but yesterday I was together with him in Washington, D.C. At a national security summit that he held there with a lot of experts and a lot of people bringing some data to bear. Okay, all right, let's go to the next call. We've only got a few more minutes with the general.
Okay, we've got three more callers. Caller number 7121, go right ahead.
General, thank you for what you do. I wanted to ask a question. This is Jim Wright. I've heard you speak on this before, but I'm appalled at how Obama and his administration have just decimated the military officers. And you spoke about that before, but I thought maybe others could want to hear this, how this purging is going on. And I guess we're down to 1940 levels. It's frightening that our military is where it is.
Well,
so please comment on that for everybody.
Yeah, I will. We're going down to really pre-World War II levels in most of the services. And that's at the same time that Iran and North Korea and China are increasing their capabilities. Russia's increasing their capabilities. And we're drawing down. And then the leadership, not only the president, but the military leadership has the audacity to stand up and tell us we don't need to worry about this, that this is going to be, we're going to be smaller and more agile. And you got to be kidding me. I mean, do you think that we believe that nonsense anymore? So, that said, here's what I think is where you're headed. The purging of the military, it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. Some of the officers, some of these generals and admirals that have left have been fired for good reason. They should have left. They were involved in adulterous affairs. They were involved in abuse of power. They were involved in a number of things that were just not acceptable. But then you got to ask the question, how did they get in those positions to begin with? Are they the people of the finest character, or were they other people that may have been more qualified, better character, that were passed over in order to put these people in positions only to find their true character come out later? So again, it's what you don't see. And what you don't see is that there are an awful lot of really fine leaders that have been bypassed by the administration because they're not willing to go along with the president's agenda. And there are also a lot of younger officers, colonels especially, that are looking at what the future holds for them, and they're saying, I don't want to be part of that. So they're making the decision on their own to leave the military before they've actually been considered for general officer. and they're moving on to other things. So there is a purging, but it's not exactly the way people see it. It's what you don't see.
Okay, let's go to the next caller.
Very good. Caller number 8416. Go right ahead. 8416.
Yes, Bishop Jackson, this is Pastor Johnson from Texas. So great to hear.
All right, Pastor Johnson, God bless you.
Yes, Mr. Boykin, I see him on Fox News all of the time. Real quickly, but it's a two-point statement with a question. One of the mistakes I see many of our conservative leaders are making is assuming that President Obama does not know or does not understand when he has from the very beginning of his initial campaign to actually state the things that he wanted to establish in the United States, and he's in a process of doing exactly that. But yet they're still saying that he doesn't know or he doesn't understand. And the second point is, do you think, General, that he, in his apology to or his promise to defend Islam when he did it in Cairo, Egypt, do you think that is related to the way he is protecting Islam and the terrorists and the whole ball of wax from that perspective?
Yes, I do. I think that it is significant that was his first stop, and that what he said was essentially an apology for America. He laid a marker down about how he would be supportive of and defend Islam. And I think that all goes back to his roots. I think it goes back to the fact that he was raised in an Islamic environment, and I think he went to a madrasa for it's undetermined, but at least 5 years of his life he went to a madrasa or an Islamic school. I think that's his comfort zone. I think that he was in Jeremiah Wright's church as a matter of convenience, but I think that his real identity is more with Islam than it is with anything else. And as such, I think that he has proven to be a reliable ally of the Islamists.
As a matter of fact, he said in the New York Times article that the sweetest sound he'd ever heard was the evening call to prayer. You know, when they broadcast it on the speakers all over a Muslim city and they're calling people to pray, he said that's the sweetest sound he ever heard. Said that in the New York Times interview, and yet, General, during my campaign, I said that actually it was before the campaign, I said President Obama has Muslim sensibilities. You would have thought that I'd called the man a nasty name. I mean, everybody knows that. It's not like it's some secret. I think he continually announces it in one way or another, and yet you are not allowed to say even that about him, that he has Muslim sensibilities, which clearly he does. Okay, we got any more callers?
Yes, we've got one more caller. Phone number ending in 1774. 1774. Go right ahead.
Well, General, thank you for all you do. And I'd like to make a small statement and then a question. The demographics are not with us, and that the rate of population growth of Muslims and their migration into Europe and America, the predictions that it would take 100 years to win this war on terrorism is terribly wrong, and the reverse is likely to happen, and we might probably lose it in 20 years. Is it realistic to stop the money flow to all terrorist organizations around the world and making it against the law and criminal to donate to these terrorists? And that includes rogue nations, all private donors, and banks who will try to launder those funds. And all coalition countries that we have now to stop trading with any country who does not live up to these rules, and punishment would be dealt by the coalition countries whose citizens commit those crimes, and the rest maybe bring them to a military court. And then the exception to these rules would be dealt with military action. Is that realistic to do?
Well, yes. I mean, I can't say that every single thing you just said is realistic, but I think the general concept of what you were saying is very realistic and needs to be done. It is important to realize that you hit on a very important subject, and that is the financing of terrorism. The reality is, when we did the bailouts, the American people, the American government became the largest purveyor of Sharia-compliant insurance when we bailed out AIG. What most people don't understand is that in doing that and in becoming, really the owner of AIG, again, a purveyor of Sharia-compliant insurance, largest in the world, what we're doing is we're giving a percentage of all profits from that company to those fighting in the cause of Allah. That means the terrorists. We are funding terrorism. Anytime you have a Sharia-compliant financial transaction, you're helping to fund terrorism. And we've got Sharia-compliant financial structures all over America. Why don't we pass a law and shut that down? The second thing is, we've got states now, and I think North Carolina just passed it yesterday, that are now passing laws protecting those states from Sharia. They're not allowing judges in those states to use Sharia to adjudicate cases. The first state to pass that was in 2010. It was Oklahoma, and they got sued by the Justice Department. So this is called American Laws for American Courts, and it's now catching on. That's another thing that we've got to keep doing. And then finally, this population issue. Europe is hopelessly lost. Europe's population rate is about 1.3, a little over 1.3. And as you know, it takes a 2.1 birth rate to repopulate. Except in Europe, 5.6 is the average birth rate for the Muslims there. And they're bringing in more Muslims, and their population rate, their birth rate is 5.6. So it's a matter of time until it's going to be an irreversible situation if it's not already. And we don't have it quite that bad in America. Our birth rate is down to about 1.9. It fluctuates, but 1.9, and we'd have a long ways to go to catch up with Europe. But it is a very serious issue, which is why Americans need to have more babies and populate this country with red-blooded patriotic Americans.
Well, General, I think that is a great point to end on. And look, I know how hard you're working. You're traveling all over the country, trying to make sure that Christians, that believers, people who believe in this country, believe in God, believe in our Constitution, get out to vote. As you depart, can you just say one further word about that?
Yeah. This is all I'll say. I don't know what God's plan for America is, but all I know is I'm responsible for and accountable for doing what He calls me to do. And I'm going to stay in this fight, and I'm going to do what I feel that He's called me to do, because Isaiah 5 says, "Woe unto you who call good evil and evil good." And I intend to be part of this spiritual battle that is standing against evil, because Psalm 94 says, "Who will rise up against this evil for me?" That's the church, and I'm part of the church, and I'm going to stand up against evil. And I want other Christians to join me in doing exactly the same thing.
Well, God bless you, General. You've been doing that all of your life, and may you continue to do it on ad infinitum until it's no longer necessary to do it. We hope.
Amen.
But God bless you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bishop. God bless you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Okay, folks, that was General Jerry Boykin. I mean, look, if there's any such thing as a true American hero, he's certainly one of them. And of course, there is. We've got them all over our country. People who served in the military, people who are serving us now. But he has been a leader in that effort. And anytime I look at somebody who's actually shed their blood fighting for our freedom, fighting for what this country represents, and I have a certain, it just moves me. And so really honored to have him on. Now, in the time that we've got left, let me hit a couple of things that are extremely important. The first is that this coming Sunday is Pulpit Freedom Sunday. If you're unfamiliar with that, you can go to the ADF website, Alliance Defending Freedom website. You can learn more about it. Please tell your pastor about this. Please let your pastor know. A lot of pastors are not even aware of it. The numbers of participants are growing. It's growing. The number is growing. But most pastors don't even know that such a thing happens. It is unconstitutional for any law to exist that tries to tell a pastor what he can or cannot say from the pulpit in his church. And yet the Johnson Amendment and the IRS regulations that have grown up since then are doing just that. That was the basis for the Foundation for Freedom from Religion suing the IRS and entering into an agreement, by the way, with the IRS to crack down on churches and crack down on pastors. It's illegal. Somebody told me that they approached their pastor about this, and their pastor was very vehement and said to the parishioner, I am not going to break the law. I want to remind us all that there is a higher law, and that is God's law. It was Martin Luther King said, a law that is not based upon the law of God is an unjust law. It is unjust and it is unconstitutional, in my humble opinion, to tell pastors what they can and cannot say, that they cannot address these issues. And by the way, folks, it's about to get worse, because I think the IRS wants pastors to shut up with regard to marriage, shut up with regard to life, shut up with regard to anything that pertains to the policies or activities of our government. It can be our defense. It can be support for Israel. It can be the need to get out and vote your values. I think they would find all of that off limits if you come down on a conservative side of those issues. Now, if you're Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton, you can use churches all day long, and you can endorse candidates all day long, and you can talk about what people need to do in order to be liberated or to find justice, no peace, whatever. And that's all fine. But if you're a conservative and you say, wait a minute, I believe in the Constitution, you're dangerous. I believe in the Bible, you're dangerous. I believe in marriage as a union between one man and one woman, you're dangerous. I believe that Islam is an existential threat to the safety and security of our country, and that while most Muslims are peaceful Muslims, Islam itself does breed violence. Oh, how dare you say such a thing? You are transgressing the law. You can't speak to these issues. Folks, all of that is completely and totally untrue. By the way, a pastor can actually, some pastors get down from the pulpit when they do this, so it's clear that they're not doing this in their official role as pastor, which is perfectly fine. But, a pastor can endorse any candidate he wants in church. He just needs to make sure that everybody understands it's not the church. This is me. This is my personal opinion and endorsement as a citizen of the United States of America. And to the extent that you take an example from me, then I want you to know what I am doing. Church can't endorse anybody because the church is a nonprofit institution, and of course that law is on the books. But there's nothing that says the pastor can't. There's nothing that says the pastor can't do that. You don't surrender your civil rights as an American citizen, your First Amendment rights as an American citizen, when you become a pastor. Sadly, many pastors are cowardly. Now, look, for those who are not, God bless them. If you are offended by that, it's probably because it hit you. You know that old saying, a hit dog squeals the loudest. Many pastors are courageous, valiant, gallant, committed, adhering to God's word without apology, without fear, and God bless them. But there are many in our pulpits across this country who are cowardly. They are afraid of their members, afraid somebody will be offended, afraid of the government, afraid of the IRS. The Bible says, as I read it, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind. We shouldn't be walking around in fear as people of God. And as American citizens, we shouldn't be walking around in fear. My goodness. And certainly a pastor who's a leader of people shouldn't be walking around in fear. But that's what we've got. Pulpit Freedom Sunday is an opportunity to break the shackles of fear and the shackles of unjust governmental interference with what pastors and churches are able to do, so I encourage you to do it. Second thing I would ask you to do is, please, if you haven't gotten a copy of the Unity Petition for Religious and Civil Rights, the Unity Petition for Religious and Civil Rights, please go to our website. I think you can print one off the website. If for whatever reason that does not work yet, or you cannot do that, Martin, let me ask you.
It is up and running. It's up and running, and okay. You can just, yep.
Beautiful. Go get it. Get a copy of it. Take it to your friends. Take it to your neighbors. Take it to everybody you know. Take it to your pastor. Ask him, will he have the congregation sign off on it? Folks, there's nothing illegal about it. It is a petition that simply says we want Congress to recognize that we have certain First Amendment rights and that those First Amendment rights should not be abridged, which is exactly what the First Amendment said. So there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't endorse any candidate if anybody's afraid of that. It doesn't endorse any party if anybody's afraid of that. It simply spells out that churches and Christians should not be persecuted, lose their jobs, have their businesses fined or regulated out of business, or be otherwise charged with hate crimes or bigotry or homophobia, you name it, simply because they hold to marriage as a union between one man and one woman, or they hold to any other article of faith. I mean, it's simple. Who would not want to sign off on that? We've got a new Congress coming in. They need to know how concerned we are about this issue. Folks, persecution of Christians is going on around the world. America is supposed to be the one haven where that can't happen. And yet it is happening. Thank God it's not violent, but it is happening. And we're going to stop it. We're going to put a stop to it. So please get a copy of that. You be your own entrepreneur. You go out there and get signatures on it. You go out there and get information and just send it to us at the P.O. Box that is on our website. And believe me, we appreciate it. We haven't officially launched it in a big public way, but we're going to. And, folks, our goal is to get 1 million signatures, 1 million. I mean, we ought to get more than that. Every American, right, left, Democrat, Republican, black, white, brown, rich, poor, male, female, every American ought to agree with it and say there's no way that anybody should be persecuted because of what they believe about marriage or any other article of faith. And do you know, folks, and may I add this, have you all heard this canard that fundamentalist Christians are just like the Islamic terrorists? Have you heard that? I have heard that multiple times. Fundamentalist Christians are just like the terrorists. We're not trying to kill anybody, and I don't even know what fundamentalist Christian means. I mean, I believe the Bible. Does that make me a fundamentalist Christian? I suppose so. I'm not interested in killing anybody. In fact, I abhor the very idea. I'm not even interested in hurting anybody. Look, I don't want people who agree with us, who disagree with us, I should say, to lose their jobs, lose their businesses. I just don't want bad things to happen to people, period. I mean, you find the most avid, committed, mean, nasty gay activist, and of course they would say there's none like that, but there's some like that, you know. But you find me that person and point to say, what do you want to happen to that person? And you know what my answer would be? Nothing. only good. I mean, I'd like to see them change their view of life. I'd like to see them repent before God, and I'd like to see them realize that God has a better plan for their lives than a same-sex relationship. But I don't want anything to happen to that person that's bad. And yet they associate us with terrorism. I mean, and folks, that sets us up for the persecution that is coming against us. So please make sure that you sign that petition. I want to make one last point before we go, and that is Corporal Sergeant Tamarisi is still being held in Mexico. Somebody approached me at a conference. In fact, it was at Frank Gaffney's National Security Conference as I was leaving. I'm in Colorado right now. Somebody approached me as I was dashing out and said, Bishop Jackson, please, we have got to do something to get this man set free. And folks, it is heartbreaking. It makes me angry. It makes me sad. It makes me upset. I don't have a plan for how to impact that situation, but I would ask you, please pray for him. And if you have an idea about something that we can do, I mean, there have been petitions. I'm sure we've all talked to our congressperson. If you haven't, please do that. Let them know that you are thinking about this young man. This man has PTSD because he served us on the battlefield, and now he's being treated like well, let's put it this way. I mean, he's being treated by our own administration, aside from Mexico right now. Let's leave that aside at the moment, the money they depend upon from us. But our own administration is treating him like he doesn't matter. I mean, again, you look at the irony that we released we meaning this president, released 5 vicious terrorists to bring home one deserter, and he is a deserter. And yet he would not pick up the telephone and call the president of Mexico and say, I want you to use your pardoning powers or whatever it takes. I want that young man home. I want him across our border today. Today. And you know what? If we had a president who had the ventricular fortitude to stand up for the people in our armed forces and to stand up for our country rather than apologizing for it, Sergeant Tamarisi would have been home the very day he was arrested or within days. I guarantee you. If the president was committed to it and cared, but we've heard stories about him having conversations with the president of Mexico, it doesn't even come up. Folks, we got to get that young man home. We've got to get him home. He's a fellow Marine, but even more importantly, he's a fellow American. So let's pray for him. Contact your congressman. Contact your senator. Tell them you want something done and you want it done now. God bless you all. The emergency continues. But remember this, we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. We'll be together again next Tuesday at noontime. Martin, do we know who we'll have with us?
Yeah, we'll have Jerry Cox from the Arkansas Family Council.
Excellent. Folks, we're going to be talking about Arkansas. Arkansas is looking pretty good in terms of values, voters getting out there and voting their values, but we're going to get a little bit of an update and report. Folks, conservatives must take over the United States Senate. They must. The brakes must be put on this president's actions. And so we'll talk a little bit about that next week. Okay? God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.